Opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one.
I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before.
You know, Wobbles, I'm kind of mad at you.
And as a reasonable man, I'm willing to do whatever's necessary to find a peaceful solution to these problems.
Welcome to Punching Up the Movie Podcast, the podcast where myself, Damian, or my co-host,
Adam,
take a film, Nightingale even, take a film that either one or both of us dislike and just kick it about and see where we land at the end of it. Today, our film is Dario Argento's Giallo classic, Deep Red, and I will hand you over to Adam for a synopsis.
This won't take long. Plot being not a particularly important part to the creators of Giallo. So Deep Red takes place in Rome, and it focuses on the murder of a psychic who, in the middle of a psychic demonstration, discerns that there is evil in the room and that someone has committed murder. She's subsequently brutally murdered, and the murder is observed by a pianist, an English expat pianist, jazz pianist, and music teacher called Marcus, played by David Hemmings. And he believes he sees the murder, and he believes he's seen the killer, and investigates the murder, and teams up with journalist Gianna, played by Daria Nicoladi, and the rest of the film tenuously follows their investigation into a web of murder and madness and more murder and Argento obsessions and swirling camera moves and immaculate compositions, and that's really all there is to say about the plot.
Yeah, great, very nice. I like that. It's very succinct and well said. So I got a lot of my information from a commentary that I saw of Deep Red by the Danish film scholar, writer, and director Thomas Rostock. The commentary is at times sight and sound-esque. It's a little bit academic, but it is filled with like loads of great little tidbits and information about the camera shots and meanings and palette and everything. So Deep Red, aka Profundo Rosso, profoundly red. I like that rather than Deep Red, profoundly red. So Dario Argento was born into the Italian film industry on September the 7th, 1940. His father, Salvatore Argento, was a film producer, and his mother, Elda Lusardo, photographed Italian film starlets of the 40s and 50s. So he was already in that world. Started off as a film critic. Then he got to co-write the story of Once Upon a Time in the West with Sergio Leone and Bernardo Bertolucci, which we briefly discussed in our earlier Once Upon a Time in the West episode. That propelled him into the world of making films. So he went on to co-write many film scripts, but always became disillusioned with the directors who didn't listen to him. So he wrote his first original script in 1969, which was his first film as a director, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which was released in 1970. It was a big hit, especially in the United States, and has been credited with popularizing the subcategory of Italian thrillers, better known as giallo films. Now, giallo means yellow and originally refers to the lurid yellow covers of a series of Italian paperback thrillers by popular crime authors like Agatha Christie, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and Edgar Wallace. The giallo murder mystery genre in film begins with two thrillers by renowned Italian horror director Mario Bava, the 1962 thriller The Girl Who Knew Too Much, aka The Evil Eye, and the 1964 film Blood and Black Lace. It was Argento's ingenious fusion of key storylines and visual content that helped popularize this series genre. Along with his unique brand of poetic and graphic imagery that resulted in Bird with the Crystal Plumage, he went on to follow with two more films in the same vein, The Cat o' Nine Tails and Four Flies on Grey Velvet, which together formed the unofficial Animal trilogy. It also paved the way for the crazed giallo wave, which took over from the spaghetti western boom, with over 100 giallo films released in the classic years from 1970 to 1975. He took a left turn directing a historical comedy drama in 1973 called The 5 Days, but apparently didn't have the best time making it, failed critically, financially. So he went back to his passion and started quickly writing Profundo Rosso with Fellini scribe Bernardino Zapponi, who'd written Satyricon, Roma, and Fellini's Casanova. Argento had also loved Michelangelo Antonioni and was massively influenced by him. So it was a coup that he managed to cast David Hemmings as the lead character, Mark Daly, who was well known for his role as the photographer in 1966's Antonio's Blowout. Profundo Rosso was also his first collaboration with the Italian progressive rock band Goblin, and would go on to work with them or their lead musician, Claudio Simonetti, 10 more times. It was also his first collaboration with Daria Nicolodi that you mentioned, who played Gianna, and she went on to become his wife in 1974 and would co-write his next film, Suspiria. Their daughter, Asia Argento, was born a year later. The original Italian release is 126 minutes, but was cut for US distribution to 105 minutes for a faster pace but less detailed versions. Most of the scenes between Mark and Gianna were cut from the US version as they were deemed to have little narrative merit. I've only seen the original Profundo Rosso version, the Italian one, with the Italian dialogue, actually with his dialogue as well, the David Hemmings in English. But the US version was dubbed into English, and it was a massive success in Italy when it was released in March 1975 and performed well internationally. There's a little bit of background. Over to you, my friend.
All right. Well, all I would add to that is when I saw it last year, it was brilliantly introduced by a man whose name I cannot remember. I think it was Joe Bell or Joey Bell or something like that. And the one thing that he talked was the influence of the artist Edward Hopper on the composition, because a lot of scenes take place in a bar, which is pretty much a pitch perfect recreation of Hopper's most famous work, Nighthawks at the Diner. So that's all I'd add. I didn't choose this. You chose this. I suggested it. I think we were just talking about Argento, weren't we? And I think you mentioned that you didn't really like his films. And then I sort of suggested Deep Red as a sort of test case, because I'd seen it at a screening in the Broadway. So I'd seen it in the version that you just, the best version you could see it in, the one that Argento would have signed off on. And it blew my mind. I'd seen it before. I'd seen Suspiria and Inferno in the cinema and had sort of mixed feelings about them. And we can talk about the differences between his giallo and his supernatural films. Although I think Deep Red, of all his giallo, probably leans a bit into the supernatural at times, and I just thought it was, especially on the big screen, I just thought it was so beautifully composed, compelling, weirdly tasteful, in spite of, I was thinking my sort of thing about Dario Argento is that it's this like brilliant, when he works, blend of the tasteful and the lurid, and they seem to sort of walk hand in hand. I wasn't bored. I can be bored in giallo films. I think they have their sort of boring stretches, and I just found this compelling from beginning to end. And just the first time I'd sort of think, well, I think this is a horror masterpiece. And I think it's a great piece of Italian cinema. And I had no idea what you think of it. So we chose Deep Red with the sort of caveat that it's a jumping off point into aspects of Italian horror, and you mentioned in our conversations Fulci, and I know you've seen other giallo. I've seen two. I've not been that diligent, but I've seen two giallo in my preparation for this. So over to you. What do you think of Deep Red? Let's start with Deep Red. Talk to me about Deep Red.
First of all, we decided this film quite a few months ago. So when that happened, I just, for some reason, went deep into that world. You were saying, I think that the Deep Red definitely bleeds into his more supernatural stuff. What did I think of Deep Red? I saw it a few months ago when we first talked about it, and I was a bit bored, to be honest with you. What you were saying about how giallo can sometimes be a little bit slow. It's not necessarily that it was slow. I just was not as engaged as I would like to be. I was definitely thinking if I'd seen this on the big screen, I would be enjoying it a hell of a lot more. If I was in a cinema, darkened room, I would appreciate the composition loads more. And then I just started watching loads of Giallo, and they all kind of, excuse the pun, but bled into each other. Um, I I honestly don't know what to think about Deep Red. I don't. It's not a film that I'm going to see again. I watched it again with the commentary, so I got to see the images and with the information behind it. It allowed me in a little bit more. It gave me a deeper appreciation for what I was watching. But it's the same problem with most Giallo films. I'm just unengaged. It looks stunning. They look brilliant. And Deep Red looks brilliant. It's beautifully shot. But I just want to feel something. And I don't really feel anything. And I'm not frightened. Obviously, it's really not that scary. It's more sort of camp, I think, by today's standard at times. I love the music. And actually, across the board, all Giallo films, the music is by far my favorite thing about them. I will listen to the soundtrack of them, but I don't know that I'll see Deep Red ever again.
Right,
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Let me make a case for Deep Red because
Please, please.
yeah, because I mean, obviously seeing, I enjoyed it. I think the first time I ever watched it, I watched the second half of it. I just caught it on Film 4, and it might have been one of the first times it had been screened, kind of in its entirety. And I was engaged in a way that I kind of wasn't with Suspiria, and they were sort of Langurs in Inferno, and those are the two that I was most sort of familiar with, and I've sort of seen a few more since then. I did care, and a lot of that has to do with David Hemmings, the casting of David Hemmings. So I think I'm not, of all the big sort of 60s stars from British cinema, he's the one I'm sort of least familiar with, and I think he's the one who sort of fell off the radar the quickest as well, and he sort of didn't maintain his sort of say beauty like Terence Stamp did, or his sort of like Michael Caine and all the others. They seem to have this sort of uninterrupted trajectory in American cinema, and David Hemmings didn't. So I found his performance very warm. He's very vulnerable. He makes mistakes. He puts himself in jeopardy. I cared for the victims. I don't always in these films. I felt like that the murder of the all of the murders are for people that are kind of quite likable. I think the murder of the psychic, and then the killer seems to go through all the kind of academics that seem to be figuring things out. And I think that the murders are less salacious than they are in other Giallo. He seems to sort of disengage from sexually motivated murders. If you watch Tenebrae, which is his last great Giallo, unless you count Opera, it's incredibly well made, but it is sleazy. It's so lurid and sleazy and pervy, and all the victims are kind of like semi-clad, gorgeous women, and there's very little of that in this. And so I felt empathy for the victims. I love the compositions. I love the weirdness of it. I think of the irony about Giallos is they're whodunits that don't actually make any sense. It's like the two I watched. I watched was it Lizard in a Woman's Skin or something, or Woman in a Lizard's Skin, and I watched Bay of Blood, Mario Bava one, and I couldn't tell you what the plot was. I couldn't really tell you. In some instances, I couldn't even tell you who killed who, or why. And it's just, but they present themselves as whodunits, and I think this makes more sense. And I think the reveal of the killer predicates. I won't say what it is. It predicates on a really interesting twist to do with something in the flat where the murder takes place, and I thought the reveal of that was incredibly clever, and. I liked all the swooping camera movements. I loved the immaculate, beautiful compositions. There was one which almost determined like my screensaver. There's one where you have a lot of conversations between David Hemmings and his friend, who's this alcoholic, take place in this piazza or this square, and there's a statue right in the middle of it, and there's just a beautiful bit where they're either side of the statue, and it was like something straight out of The Great Beauty. So I think there's an interesting line between, say, Blowout via Deep Red to Paolo Sorrentino's The Great Beauty that I don't think is illegitimate. I think his films, when they're good, are beautiful. He loves architecture. He has incredible good taste. And I did find it scary in places. The scene I remember, and I'll stop talking about it, the scene I remember when I first saw it that really captured my attention is a scene where David Hemmings is in a ruined house looking for something. And it's got that like funky bass line from, Goblin that sounds like something out of Mike Oldfield or Tubular Bells. And it's funky, but it's really sinister. And it's a scene where not a lot happens. And it's David Hemmings wandering around this abandoned house, which is one of the most threatening houses I can think of in cinema that I've seen. Probably you have to go back to the Psycho house for a house that's that threatening. And not a lot happens in the scene, but there's something and it's just a synthesis of Dario Argento's filmmaking, David Hemmings' sort of fear, and just the production design and the music that makes this house evil. And I like the way that evil permeates the whole thing. It's just there's this real sense of just evil everywhere, and everything's sort of kind of corrupt, but either incredibly tasteful or there's a ruined decadence. So that's how I'd sort of articulate how I liked Deep Red. So I don't know if you want to pick anything out of that or just reject it all.
I'm not going to reject any of it. I'm glad you brought up the Paolo Sorrentino Great Beauty, because that was straight in my mind when I saw it as well. It's a stunning, stunning shot. Like I said, the composition and the camera work is just beautiful, and it's like massively influential on, a plethora of films that have come in the same genre, in the sort of murder mystery genre, as well as, the lineage to Sorrentino. I found it interesting in the research that Daria Nicolodi, who went on to write Suspiria with him, she was the one who pushed him towards the occult. She's really into the occult, and so the writing then went into in Suspiria and then Inferno. And I rewatched Suspiria. I just thought, let me just give it another go, because when I first saw it, I thought, oh, it's okay, and then I watched it again, and I just found it boring. How can you? It's like an hour and a half, and there's moments where one of the victims is like just running from the killer, and all I'm thinking is just get it over and done with. Like you're just stretching this out now unnecessary. We get that, we get it, and I just felt similar in Deep Red. Yeah, I don't hate the film, and like I said, I wish I'd seen it. I'm repeating myself, seen it on the cinema, but there wasn't much apart from the music. I did like David Hemmings. I did like the banter between David Hemmings and Daria Nicolodi. I thought that was nice. That was a nice human element that you don't necessarily get to see in a lot of Giallo films. Yeah, and just
Yeah, I weirdly enough, that was the bit. It was interesting that you said, because I assumed that in the American cut they'd have cut the violence. I didn't realize they cut the majority.
yeah,
I would have welcomed a bit more of that, to be honest, because I was very ambivalent about her. I kind of liked her almost. I wrote in my notes. I thought she was really irritating, and it's weird because they seem to be going, because obviously Dario Argento is a massive cineast, and it seems that what they're going for there is some kind of like Howard Hawks, His Girl Friday, sort of
back
Cary
and
Grant
forth.
and Rosalind Russell back and forth. And you get this sort of chauvinism of David Hemmings, which is quite comical to watch now. I'd be interested to see how it would have gone down in 1975. But he's constantly undercut by her. He's constantly, and you've got the kind of visual joke of him in her, is it Minnie? And the seat doesn't work, so it's a small
Yeah,
car anyway. And that's a nice visual joke. But I felt like I just sort of swung backwards and forwards on her, and initially she really irritated me. And then I just put down in my notes, was it Stockholm syndrome? Because I kind of got, I thought, yeah, no, she's all right. And then, she does that sort of scene where she's doing a sort of cod sexy walk So he's like
yeah,
mocking
going
them, and
out the
it was
door.
awful. It was just terrible, terrible. And I always feel like Italian movies, in the same way that John Ford westerns are always undercut by really kind of crass comedy and sentimentality. Italian westerns, and I'm going to extend that to Italian horror movies now, are just spoilt by comedy. I just find Italian comedy in these things just really broad and just feels like tone not tone deaf morally, but it just seems to come in from another movie and doesn't belong there. But having said that, there's a scene where she gets injured, and I was genuinely upset. I thought, oh no, she's been
Yeah,
hurt.
yeah.
Is she going to die? And I won't say whether she dies or not if you haven't seen the film, but it's like, it's like, oh no, I did find tension in the killings actually, because I actually there was that sense as where's it's going to come from, and I think he's very subtle. I mean, you don't normally use the word subtle. He's subtle in the setting up of the killings, I think, because there's bits on sort of repeat viewings where the camera will swoop past a window and swoop past it again, and it's only in the second it's maybe you notice fractionally the window's open and it wasn't before, and you're just wondering where the killer's going to come from. And I think where he positions the killer in the frame and they make their appearance is always kind of interesting and unexpected. What did you think? Because there's a famous sequence and it makes no sense. I remember I sent you a Guillermo del Toro trailers from Hell commentary,
Mm,
and one of the things he says that the film doesn't have to make logical sense, it has to make lyrical sense. And if you try and add all the elements up, there are things in it that couldn't possibly happen, even though it probably has the most coherent plot and the most coherent kind of murder mystery plot of all of them. And there's a sequence, really famous sequence, that must have been a massive influence on the Saw franchise, where a mechanical automaton appears. And it's one of the most sort of memorable and iconic, and it's weird and it's strange and so creepy. And what do you think of that sequence? Did that
yeah, I thought that was great.
were
Yeah,
you?
loved it,
Yeah.
loved it, loved it.
Mm.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
kind of wanted more of that. I wanted more of the psychological element, I think, and the bits that I enjoyed most were like the film opens, doesn't it, with a murder in a shadow, and then a knife being dropped, and then some school child's feet walking towards and then you get to see a bit of that later on, a little bit
Yeah, because
more.
that's
I
what that,
like
that
all that.
interrupts the credits as well, which is really clever. Because I was thinking,
Mm,
if I remembered this wrong, I thought I'd remember more of the theme, because I love the soundtrack. I have a
yeah,
Goblin box set of
nice.
CDs and things like that. And and I thought that was really clever that you just very very abruptly interrupt the credits and you just give this fragment of murder and then go straight back to the credits and then don't refer back
Yes,
to that.
yeah,
So I think there's a lot more. There's a lot more of that. There's a lot more sort of callbacks rather than you get the sense in some Giallo that they're just sort of making it up as they go along,
yeah,
in the worst possible way, and they don't know who the
yeah.
killer is. It really doesn't matter, and
No,
it's like,
yeah.
yeah,
We'll find out on the
yeah.
last day of shooting.
Yeah, or maybe,
We'll
or maybe
decide
not,
later.
or
Yeah,
maybe not.
yeah.
Just, but yeah, no, I loved it, and I think it's been elevated to a favorite horror film of mine now, and I do think it's a masterpiece. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I think
you and lots of other people.
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, we wouldn't be having it on, like,
That's true.
by definition, it has to be considered, a masterpiece or a cult classic or something like that to qualify to be on here. So, what do you want to talk about some of the other Giallo that you've seen, or other directors? Because my what I thought, and we talked. I think I can't remember what episode it was on, but we talked. I think it was on One Cut of the Dead when we talked about zombie films, didn't we? And I said at that point I preferred Fulci to Argento. I might retract some of that today, but you saw a few Fulci films. I don't think they weren't Giallo, were they, or were they? He did a few Giallo, but
He
he's more
did some
famous for
Jello.
his he's more famous for his sort of zombie heavy, um, what they call the Gates of Hell trilogy, and his sort of more kind of supernatural themed kind of assaults on the senses. So
Yeah, don't torture a duckling in
yes,
1972. That was a official giallo. We both saw that. Didn't you saw that a while back, right?
I saw that a
I think
few
I
years
saw
ago.
that on your recommendation. That was The Priest, wasn't it? Is that right? The Priest and the Child Murders.
Yes, and the
Uh,
woman who's kind of killed as a witch, like beaten to death, like with
yes,
chains and
yeah.
things like that. Yeah,
Again, I just kind of I remember seeing it and just being a little bit meh about it, and didn't really feel engaged. Later on, Fulci's that I watched Zombie Flesh Eaters, which was the one where the zombies on the boat, isn't it? It comes into New York and the
yeah,
zombies.
yeah.
Yeah.
Most of it's set on the Caribbean, and yeah,
Yes, yeah. There was one actor who I really liked, and they were talking about how he kind of brought it as a in a genre type film. I think he was like an RSC actor. I think he played the Doctor
yeah. Was it Ian
on the
Ian Cullen?
island.
I think his name is, or
Right,
Ian.
yeah.
It's either Ian Cullen or Ian McCulloch. One of those
Right.
two.
Yeah,
I always
yeah.
get them mixed up.
It was okay. I couldn't, I had to turn off City of the Living Dead. Like I don't turn off films, but I just was so, this is disgusting for the sake of being disgusting. You're just trying to shock me now and show me the most disgusting um images of like innards and I just wasn't bothered about. I didn't care about any of them, so I had to turn that off. So Fulci is not a. Is that? Can you name me another Fulci film apart from those
Oh,
three?
The Beyond,
Yeah, I never
set in New
saw The Beyond.
Orleans, The House by the Cemetery.
Never
These are the
saw
ones I've
that.
seen.
Yeah,
I can talk about one I did see. Was it Leopard? Was it, oh, I've forgotten the name. Was it? I think you've seen this. Was it woman in lizard in a woman's skin or woman
Lizard
in
in
a?
a Woman's Skin. That was
Yeah,
Fulci as well. Yeah, I think I probably enjoyed that most out of all of them. You watched that recently, right?
yeah. I watched that this last week. I watched. I thought I'd watch one by Fulci and one by Bava. And I'd never
Yeah,
seen a Bava film before. I'll come on to Bava in a minute.
yeah.
No, I like Lucio Fulci. No one believes me when I say this. I don't really like the gore, but I
Mm.
think there's I love. I think we talked about this with. I love the way again he composes a frame. I love the way he always seems to end his movies in these strange, desolate hellscapes. Which is, I'm not saying it's a shame you didn't get to the end of City of the Living Dead, but because you probably wouldn't have cared when you got. But the
Yeah.
end takes place in this sort of cavernous underworld where you have all these like crumbling, desiccated dead that just aren't moving, and people have to kind of move. I think the end of the Beyond, when you see this sort of endless, his hellscapes are never fiery; they're always kind of windswept and desolate. And I think there's something that he has in common with Kurosawa in the way he uses like wind and dust. And there's these beautiful, just like little, I would say, visual grace notes in the middle of all the gore. There's this incredible sequence in The Beyond where a woman walks out of a house and all the lights go on and there's a silhouette at every window, or someone just kind of walk. It might have been done in sort of reverse. Someone sort of runs out of the house. And it's the way people run in a Chinese ghost story, Japanese movies, where they kind of, I don't know how they do it. It's almost like they're running backwards and projected forwards, and this real sort of, and there's so much stuff like that in his movies that just kind of keeps me interested and visually engaged. And I did like Don't Torture a Duckling. I remember I was poorly and I remember watching about three films. I remember watching that and Lone Wolf McQuade with Chuck Norris. And it was just like one of the best days I'd had being ill. You're just sitting and watching movies. And I thought it was I like the rural setting of it, the fact that it was set rurally and it had some Italian actors, Thomas Milian in it that I like. He's in a lot of spaghetti westerns. But I thought it looked great and it was genuinely disturbing. It was a great murder mystery. The killings were just kind of insanely violent. I'm not quite sure how I felt about those, because you have this scene where a woman's basically whipped to death with chains, but lynched. I like the fact that it actually had something to say about, kind of mob mentality and, scapegoating the other and protecting, the kind of establishment and stuff like that. But I just thought it looked great, and it looked great in a rural setting. And I think it's interesting that Fulci. I've seen a lot of Fulci's westerns. I like those. I think those westerns are really good. And I think his westerns are starting to get a bit more traction these days. So he did and they're interesting because you can pick them out as Fulci westerns because people get whipped quite a lot. He likes that. There's a and there's an undercurrent of really, really savage perverse violence in them. He did a movie with Django. What's his name? Franco Nero. I think it's called Massacre Time, and it opens with humans being chased and hunted, like foxes get hunted with dogs, and then the big centerpiece is this like whip fight. It's just so like I can't believe they got away with it in the mid 60s. And then he did this like Western called Fall for the Apocalypse, again with Thomas Millian, about three people kind of in the wilderness who have to sort of are taken captive by this outlaw who's a bit sort of psychedelic, but there's cannibalism in it, and it's just so I like Fulci, but I didn't like Lizard in a Woman's Skin, or I just thought it was really everything you said about Deep Red I thought applied to this. I thought it was really boring, made absolutely no sense. It was set in London, which I thought was quite interesting. It was interesting seeing that giallo aesthetic applied to Alexander Palace, and other London monuments. It must have been shortly before he died, because it had a I don't know what I'm doing here, I really need the money performance from Stanley Baker. You've always got, and he just if ever an actor just doesn't belong in the giallo world, it's probably Stanley Baker. There's something just like very granite like and solid about him, and but what it did have what it did have, which it completely undercuts as a film goes, like, it had these fantastic dream sequences, which Fulci's very good at. It opens with a phenomenal dream sequence, and then they kind of explain everything, which they didn't. Every bit of the dream has a significance that relates to the revealing of the plot, which kind of makes no sense. And then this is what it's famous for, because I think it got censored for it. They have a scene where you've got some Carlo Rambaldi, the great special effects monster guy who designed E.T. and the I think King Kong although I think they rejected his version of King Kong because it just didn't work, and then just put a man in a monkey suit in the Jeff Bridges version, and he's I think he might have done the snake in Conan the Barbarian, but which again probably didn't work. So he's famous for doing these incredible designs that don't work. And he has a mechanical goose in it in a dream sequence, and then they have this bit where the heroine, in the middle of this medical institute, discovers this room full of dogs with pipes coming out of them, and it makes no sense. There's no, you don't know why, you don't know if she's hallucinating, but so those sequences are phenomenal, and everything else is so boring, and I'm trying to recall the kills, I can't remember them. So that's Fulci. Any more thoughts? You're
recalling things that I've just forgotten about Lizard in a Woman's Skin. I remember the dog bit. Apparently, he got taken to court because they thought it was real dogs.
When you watch it now, it really they look like kind of Muppet dogs. They were just
dark
crystal
dogs
taken from the Jim Henson workshop and just mutilate.
Exactly.
Why did they think they were real?
I don't. Yeah, God knows. Well, 1971. I suppose they'd never seen anything that graphic before. Same as Cannibal Holocaust, right? And that happened.
Well, except they did kill. They did kill.
They killed animals. Yeah. But I think they thought it was a snuff film, didn't they? They thought people were really being killed. The one that I enjoyed the most was and I think I missed a trick, really, because it was the first Mario Bava, The Girl Who Knew Too Much, Stroke the Evil Eye. I really enjoyed that. I thought it was really beautifully put together. It was in black and white. And that's another thing that I just thought, this feels more tense because of the lack of color, and that giallo is known for its color. The deep reds like that you see all the time, I think were not as effective to me as seeing them in black and white. And plus the plot was really good. It was kind of it made sense. An American tourist witnesses a murder. I mean, isn't that pretty much every giallo near enough? And it starred John Saxon, who then went on to be in Tenebrae, right? Was he in Tenebrae?
Yeah, he's in Tenebrae, yeah.
I hated Tenebrae. Hated it. Hated it more than anything. And then I'm watching loads of YouTube videos about the best giallos, and Tenebrae's up on like people's number one.
I think it's the most violent giallo, I think. It's just incredible. Yeah. I liked Tenebrae. I thought it was pervy and sleazy, but I liked it.
You see, the pervy sleazy aspect I think is just done better. I really like I saw a couple of films by Sergio Martino, both of which I really enjoyed, and that was Torso, four co-ed girls go to a countryside villa and try and escape this murderer, and then everybody gets mashed up pretty much. And The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward. I think, let's see, Torso was 73 and Mrs. Ward was 71. I liked both of those. They had all the aspects of Giallo in them. I felt like the narrative was uh, clearer, even though murder mysteries are confusing and you don't know what's happening until you know what's happening. I think I was more invested in the characters. I really like there was the girl who played Mrs. Ward. She's Edwige Fenech. Apparently, she was in loads of Giallos. Absolutely stunning, beautiful brunette, dark hair, like with these big eyes, and I thought she was great. I really liked her acting as well. And yeah, so if I'm going Giallo, I'm going Mario Bava and Sergio Martino as opposed to Romero and sorry, not Romero, Argento and Fulci.
I will, with the qualification, this is the only Mario Bava film I've seen, and I want to see others. I want to see his more kind of classical gothic horrors, like I can't remember the one with Barbara Steele and Christopher Lee and Boris Karloff. I saw Bay of Blood, which is considered his most deranged giallo. I think Blood and Black Lace is like the one people
That's
kind of
the
hold
one I
on to.
slipped on.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
wanted to. I
yeah.
should have seen that, but yeah,
Yeah, I
Bay
should
of
have.
Blood.
I think I should have seen that, but I didn't, and I'm going to blame Joe Dante because in his was it Severin Closet YouTube video, he talked about that, and he just said, it was, yeah, and you can see, so it was a massive influence on Friday the 13th because it's essentially set by a bay, or you could double for Crystal Lake, and it's a series of kind of increasingly sort of inventive kills, including two people having sex being speared um, with a harpoon, which obviously has its it's pretty much taken off. Exactly, and it's the most famous kill in the first. But has its precedent in the Bible. Did you know that? So it'd be interesting to see if Mario Bava had. All of these guys have got kind of really interesting relationships with the church and religion, and most of them hate
Yeah,
the Catholic Church. But that's a famous Old Testament killing, where a priest spears two people, a priest called Phineas, two people while they're having sex. You know,
so out of
um,
order.
well, not in that sense because it like initiated a massive plague because they were the Moabite
Okay,
women who were in Israel. Yeah, and I'm going to stick up for Phineas in this instance,
okay.
but yeah, but it has that, and he was really really sort of like talking up the kills, and he was saying that it's got the most deranged ending. You got to see it for the ending, and I have to say. The ending, it's almost like the last 2 minutes of the film comes out of nowhere and is laugh out loud, black comically funny. You think, oh my goodness, that's insane. And I'm not going to say what it is; it would spoil it. But everything up to there is just a confusing. I mean, I'll tell you what he does do, and what I do like about Bava is he kind of goes away. I mean, it's interesting you talk about him doing a giallo in black and white because Bay of Blood is it's a color film, but it leans as close to being a black and white movie. It's set, and he's very good at making water and woods look incredibly sinister, which they are. I mean, and everything's shot in the darkest hues possible, the darkest tones. So it kind of goes against the grain of normal giallo, and it's a very moodily lit, dark, blackly lit, and I really like that. But I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you what
What
happened
was
at the end
going
of it.
on?
I could
Yeah.
tell you who killed who and why and what. I mean, I could tell you who killed who, but I couldn't tell you
Mm.
why. I was completely in a muddle. But the last sort of 5 minutes is as Joe Dante. I think he missold me. I'll have to sort of take him to task next time I see him. But for the fact that the last 5 minutes is just delightfully mental. And so yeah, but I feel like I owe Mario Bava because I think he is seen as the classiest of all of them. Not on the basis of like Bay of Blood particularly, but and he worked unlike the others. He worked with genuine horror icons. So he worked with Karloff, and he worked with Christopher Lee a couple of times, and also he sort of made a horror icon of the great Barbara Steele. So he sort of introduces her to the world of horror. And she's a nice link, because she's brilliant in I can't remember if it's the Dolce Vita or 8.5. She's in one of the Fellini films. She's like English actress in that, and she's had a phenomenal cult career, and so I think I need to see more Bava films. On the basis of that Bava film, it was
Yeah.
kind of fun up to a point, and then I watched it in about three chunks. It's only like an hour and 40 minutes. That wasn't a good sign.
Yeah.
And then
No.
I think the last 5 minutes is great, but everything else was just I could have done without it. Apart from the beautiful,
Mm.
moody lighting that reminded me of. Do you remember those public information films that have now become infamous in the 70s? That terrified kids about climbing up pylons, playing on farms, and going anywhere near the water.
Mm.
And
Mm.
the best one for me is the water one, because it's got Donald Pleasance as this hooded kind of spirit, who's just trying to entice kids into the water and drown them.
I am the spirit of dark and lonely water, ready to trap the unwary, the show-off, the fool. And this is the kind of place you'd expect to find me.
The way that's filmed, and the way they kind of imbue water with menace and evil, that you best stay out of it. There's horrible stuff down there. It's going to drag you to the bottom. There was something akin to that in Bay of Blood, which I liked. So, but I thought Deep Red stood head and shoulders above everything I've seen in the genre. Just to put it
Right.
full stop. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Argento using his own hands in the as the
yeah,
killer in all the thing in
yeah,
the gloves. I thought that was quite an interesting
yeah.
um tidbit of information, and also that he apparently Fritz Lang used to do that.
Oh, I did not
Um,
know that.
Yeah, so apparently Argento has obviously been called the Italian Hitchcock,
Mm.
and he always insisted that he was more influenced by Lang than he was Hitchcock. Even though after a while, I think everybody just ignored him and said, "You're the Italian Hitchcock." And just went, "Okay, fuck it, I'm the Italian Hitchcock." Okay, whatever.
That's worse,
Which
worse
is
things to be called.
exactly, exactly. But yeah, I thought that was quite a little interesting tidbit. I've got a little anecdote for you.
Of
In
course you have.
1997, I won a ticket to see the Time Out, but with Time Out to see all the films of the film festival that year. And one of the films I saw was a film called Bee Monkey, directed by Michael Radford, who directed Il Postino.
Right. Yeah, 1984.
Yes, in 1984. And sat next to me in the screening was Asia Argento. So I'm sat there watching this film. I've no idea what this film is. Again, film festival, you've won a ticket, you just keep going, seeing, oh, that looks kind of interesting. Boom, 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 boom. And the film featured quite a lot of nudity. And I'm sat as a 26, 27-year-old like young man next to Asia Argento. Yeah, I mean, to put it bluntly, I was definitely embarrassed. And if the lights were on, I think I would have gone red. If my brown skin can go red,
You've gone
it would
deep,
definitely be
deep red.
flushed.
Deep
Deep
red with
red, I would have
embarrassment.
gone deep red for sure. And looking back at it, I have no recollection of the film apart from nudity and that I sat next to her at the screening. But Jared Harris was in it, and Rupert Everett, Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, and yeah, I don't remember anything about it at all. Um, yeah, that's my nice little sat next to her.
Yeah. What was she like? Did she say anything? What was she look?
She didn't,
She.
mate. I was just nervous. I think later on,
Yeah.
if it was maybe 5, 10 years later, I would have said nice performance or something to her. But I think I was
Yeah.
just
Thought your
shitting
mum was
myself.
rubbish. Thought your mum was
Yeah.
rubbish in Deep Red. All that occult stuff.
Yeah.
Rector,
No.
not sure about
Yeah, I
that.
was going to watch Inferno after Suspiria, but then I just thought, you know what? I'm not. I don't think I'm a big fan of Argento. I don't think I'm.
I don't think you would have enjoyed Inferno. I think Inferno's
Yeah.
influential. It's interesting to talk about. We could talk about like the influence of Giallo and where you see Giallo in like sort of more modern cinema, or because there's a sequence in I mean, Guillermo del Toro is kind of quite upfront and center about the influence of Argento on some of his work, and there's a famous sequence. It's all set in a hotel. It is a sequel. It's a sort of nominal sequel in a way. It's set in the same world as Suspiria, so it's like, it explores the mythology of the three mothers, the three sort of witch mothers, and one of them's in Berlin, one of them's in New York, and then I think the third one's in Rome, in the film that no one likes, that he made like 20 years too late or something.
Did you see it?
I didn't know. I haven't seen any of Argento's. I think Opera is probably the most recent one I saw, and I think that was like 1990. That was seen as a kind of a late, just when people had written him off, a late flowering of.
That was 87.
Brilliant.
I've got it here.
Yeah. Oh, was it? Yeah. And yeah. So and they have a sequence where someone's looking for a key in a flooded hotel room, which Del Toro references in the first Hellboy film, where Abe Sapien, the amphibian man, has to go into this flooded sewer to retrieve something. Yeah, I don't know, because I know that Edgar Wright's a fan, and Last Night in Soho is a kind of swinging 60s riff on Giallo, which I think's better than most Giallo I've seen. I love that film. I think that film works.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Is there anything you'd like to say on the, or are you Giallo'd out?
Yellowed out. Yeah, massively influential. They just sort of moved into the slasher movies, Halloween, those kind of films. Even like the tinkling music of Halloween is, very reminiscent of the music in Deep Red that Goblin did. And apparently Argento and Goblin got together, and Argento said he wanted something like Tubular Bells. So they came up with their version of it, which then has become.
But Carpenter's stripped back. I mean,
Yes.
you have the glidings, you have the Steadicam. I don't think had Steadicam in. I don't know what the equivalent of the Steadicam was in '75. I don't know when the Steadicam was invented. But he almost like sort of takes the bare bones of Giallo and then goes in the other direction, because there's something so restrained and controlled. The kills aren't particularly violent. I would say like Halloween 2 is more Giallo-like, because the kills are a lot more lurid. It's a lot more sort of grotesque, and there's so much control and I would say restraint in the first Halloween and stuff like. And even the music, because the Goblin music isn't. I mean, they're a prog band. And there's bits where they go full prog, and there's like bits that sound like Keith Emerson, in Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Whereas he doesn't do that. He's sort of stripping his sound back and making it as sparse as possible. So it's interesting.
Sure.
You can see the influence, but you see him almost sort of zigging where Argento zags, and it's like, I'm gonna, stylistically go in the other direction. I don't know how conscious that was, or that was just like his aesthetic, because you see it in Assault on Precinct 13, which I think came out the same year as Deep Red, I think, and stuff like that. The one thing that fascinates me about Giallo movies that I noticed in this and others is children are evil, or children. There's no innocence in there. Like you see a child, you mistrust the child, and it's weird, because I think he's got that in common with Peckinpah. I just wrote down in my notes. He's in Peckinpah, he has all these scenes of children torturing insects or playing on hangman's nooses, and you just have that scene, which is. And it kind of doesn't really go anywhere. It's a bit of a red herring. We have this child, don't you? This very, very, very pretty, but kind of really kind of unwholesome child, who has this lizard that she's skewered and is leading David Hemmings to this dark house, but then kind of warns him that a ghost there. She's a very ambivalent figure, because she seems concerned about him, but she seems very cruel, and that seems to be something that's shot through in it seems something I've noticed in Giallo, is that children are children are sort of corrupted very early on in these movies, and they are poisoned and they're evil or insane or things like that. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing that
Yeah, maybe there's something that they not only that they've been poisoned, but they were born like that. That like maybe there's an inherent sort of evilness within humanity that Giallo tends to focus on. I think.
Yeah, because I think when all's revealed in Deep Red, the reason isn't really revealed, is it? You know the how, but you don't really know the why. You know the why in some instances, but there's still questions that aren't answered. You know when you know who the perpetrator is, and it's like, how did you become like that? Not that you need to know. You know, I mean, in Psycho, you kind of know. In Psycho, you know this guy was kind of you know whatever madness there might have been in him inherently is exacerbated by his mother. And his mother kind of turns him into a monster, you know, and then he sort of literally turns into his mother, doesn't he, and stuff like that. And you don't have to know. I do like the Guillermo del Toro. I think the wisest thing I've heard said about Giallo, which doesn't always apply, but I think certainly applies in Deep Red, is that it doesn't have to make logical sense. It has to make lyrical sense. And I think Deep Red, and we can end our discussion on Deep Red. Unless you want the last word, he says, Deep Red for me makes lyrical sense.
I'll buy that for $1. Yes, very nice. I have some thoughts on our next film, but we'll talk outside this space. And this is the first one of 2026, the first official one, and let's see how many we can get through. See if we can get through them. They're fun to do. I enjoy them. I'm sure you enjoy them.
I can't think of anything that I particularly hate at the moment, which worries me.
It's okay.
Yeah,
maybe we'll go into catching up. We had that idea of catching up, didn't we? Anyway, we'll get back to you, and you'll know soon enough. And Deep Red will be out soon, so be careful. Watch out for knives, blades, strange killers, automatons.
Children.
Yeah, children, strange camera angles, swooping camera angles. If anything like that happens, just get the fuck out of there now, because it's not going to end well for you, for sure.
Funky German bass lines.
Yeah, just in the background.
If you hear that,
yeah.
whatever you're building is,
run.
Make a swift exit.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you. I shall see you next time. Thanks, Adam, for that. That was a lot of fun. Ciao.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bye.
The mission has been completed.
Groovy.